Just creating drama for my life.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Got it. Well, this ought to be a good lesson. This is where we're on YouTube now. I'm just getting everything set up. This is Don't Make Assumptions. And so this one is
Just creating drama for my life.
Oh, that's what you said. Okay, we got it. Yeah, got it. Got it. I always forget to do that. Always forget to do that. All right. Okay. Welcome everybody. Welcome to the Bible Hangout. This is our 7th year. Are we turning 7 years old? I believe so. We started in September 2013. Can you believe that? That's like unbelievable that we've been going strong this long. And so I want to thank you for some of you who've been with me since the beginning of this. And really where this started is I just ran out of material that I could share in the 2-hour class that I had, that I was holding on site at Up Church. And it has continued to grow and thrive. We are currently in a series on the 4 agreements based on Don Miguel Ruiz's The 4 Agreements. And I really wanted to hit that series right now because of the election season. And right now in the US, when we're taping this, we are 5 days. What is that? Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Yeah, we are 5 days from knowing the fate of our country. And this has been billed as the election of our lifetime. And it really is like that because we don't know which consciousness is going to win out. And even if one consciousness wins out, we don't know what the aftermath of that is going to bring. So I thought this was a really good time to come back to this conversation and to look at the agreements that we are making. And what's interesting is I'm teaching this lesson in a number of different areas, not just in what we're doing at a church, but I'm also working with another community, and then we are focusing on that for that community. We're doing it in the Bible Hangout. I'm doing it in the Soul Refresh on Wednesdays. Like we're just hitting this at a number of different angles because regardless of what happens on November 3rd, regardless of who quote unquote wins, you still have to live with whatever emotions and feelings and things like that got awakened during this time. And so I wanted to basically kind of go back to the basics and get you prepared so that when on November 3rd comes, whatever negative energy that you might have picked up, you can leave it deposited right on November 3rd and keep stepping in your life. And so that's what this is about. If you are watching on YouTube, please hit the like button and subscribe, and then share this video with a friend. You know, we really are like one of the best kept secrets, this Thursday night Bible study. And I want to stop being the best kept secret, and I want to be the best known Bible study. So please spread the word, hit the share button, tell somebody about this, and invite a friend to be a part of this conversation. We are winding down our year. We normally take a break during the holidays, and that's a chance for me to regroup. And I promise you, I need that after this year. I don't know if your life is like mine, but I've been working around the clock. And so we'll take a break, not as long as we did last year, but we'll take a break during the holidays from Thanksgiving to New Year's. So our last Bible Hangout will be the Thursday before Thanksgiving, and then we'll pick back up right after the New Year. All right, and I'm excited to get into that. So tonight, do not make assumptions. Don't make assumptions. And wait a minute, I want to back up. Something that I gave you guys a couple of weeks ago, and I hope that you are doing it, is the 30 days of self-love. So I've been filling mine in. I'm on my 4th week. I'm making my way through it. I've been hoping that you guys are doing the 30 days of self-love. And I did ask about it last time. I want to take a moment to put everybody on the spot again and ask, how are you doing with your 30 days of self-love?
I actually want to start November 1st. So to give that starting point. So look,
you know that's like, I'm going to start working out on Monday.
Yep. But I got it down, November 1st, and I'll let you know.
Okay. Rashi, I know Rashi's watching on YouTube. Rashi, what about you? You doing that 30 days of self-love? What you doing? Andrea, I know you may not have caught the 30 days of self-love, but I'm still checking in. Did you know about the challenge?
Yeah, I was on when you talked about it, and I actually forgot about it, but I honestly think I do pretty good giving myself some self-love.
Okay.
I
Okay.
really do
Okay.
think so.
Gloria, Dr. Belton, what about you guys?
I have not been consistent. This is Dr. Dalton, I have to admit, but I have done it. And
Okay.
that is something that I guess I really feel much better that at least I've done it a few times. I've hugged myself and told myself how much, I love me and what I need to be doing. So I need to get more consistent with it. But I do thank you for the idea to start it.
Good, good, good. Gloria, what about you?
Self-love for me is staying positive and thinking positive. And that's how I'm expressing my self-love and trying to do that each day.
Okay. Would you be open to being challenged on that idea?
Being challenged.
On that idea.
Okay.
Based on what you just said,
Okay.
whatever you choose as a significant other, woman or man, if they handled you that way and they said, this is how I'm going to show my love for you, would that be enough for you?
With them being positive towards me.
Would that be enough? It's okay if it is. I'm just asking. Would it be enough?
I think so.
Okay. All right.
For this phase of my life, yes.
Okay. Okay. When I started thinking about self-love, because I think that like all of us answer the question, do I love myself? Right. And then the answer is, well, yeah, of course I love myself. But then when I started looking at like love, if there were some man that I was in a relationship with and he told me that he loved me, then that love looks like something.
Mm-hmm.
That love has a picture. that love's got some actions behind it. And so it made me begin to look at my own definition of self-love. And so that's really where this challenge came from. It was just recognizing that, wait a minute, Sherry, I think you're saying you love yourself, but I think you could be more loving towards yourself. And so that's really where the challenge came. And so it was about doing something every day, because that's what a love relationship would be like. Like every day I would get a love note, or I would get a dinner somewhere, or maybe I might get flowers, or we might go to the movies, or it's like, but every day there would be something that was a demonstration of I love you and you're important to me and you matter to me. So that's what I'm throwing out there.
Normally, I'm so busy that I don't even take time to think about things like that. So now I'm taking time, a conscientious effort to sit there and pray and think, so it's something that I'm doing positives that before I wasn't really taking time to do.
Okay, I'm receiving that. I'm here to be the angel on your shoulder to say, hey, Gloria, let's look at this a little deeper. But okay, I received that. In the comments, Rashi says, I hang out with my sister and had boba. What's boba? And we did some walking and did some mirror work. Walk. Oh, wait, I don't know what that is. Maybe she means mirror work. Anyway, okay, great. So I'm just challenging you guys because, again, it doesn't really have to be the most loving thing that you could do. Because like you said, our lives are busy. I know my life is extraordinarily busy. I've got a really, really hectic schedule just with the work that I'm doing. And so finding time to do something every day is challenging. Sometimes I've got to mix it up. For example, was it yesterday? Maybe it was the day before yesterday. I bought these little, I don't have it close, otherwise I get it, but I bought these little wooden cars and Jordan and I painted the cars. And that was an activity. So that gave us, mommy son time. And that was also a de-stress activity for me. And then on another day, I took a paint and sip class, which took a couple of hours, but it was on the weekend. But another day, like today, I just made myself a delicious lunch. Like I actually took time to like really make a lunch and eat on a plate, not out of like a, a frozen dinner box or, so again, it was like, it's what's the best that you can do for yourself today. And so, and then sometimes the most loving thing that you can do for yourself is to take a nap. I had an instance like that where I had a headache and it was like, you know what, I got to take a nap. I got to lay down. So just want to throw out there that, taking care of yourself or loving yourself doesn't have to be this grand gesture. That often when you're in love with someone, it's really the little things that make the difference. It's not the big diamond. It's the coffee when you're like pressed for time and trying to get a report out and just someone brings you a cup of coffee and does something nice for you. So one of the things, this was from Conscious Living. That's a book that I'm reading right now. And I think what I'm going to make that the first series that we touch on after the beginning of the year, because it's so powerful. And the book is called Conscious Living. Gay Hendricks is the author, and it is powerful. And this is what he says. He says that if we don't love ourselves, we will always be chasing it from others. If our feelings toward ourselves are flavored with guilt and criticism, our love toward others will be contaminated by those same flavors. Loving yourself is not about conceit. Conceit is like this attempt to prove to others that you're lovable when you've decided inside that you really aren't. Isn't that something? When we see someone and we say, oh, that person is conceited, they're so full of themselves. But really what has happened is that they have decided inside of themselves that they are not lovable, and they put on this external picture that they want you to buy into. Oh, I love me. And it's like, okay. But genuine love recognizes the oneness between all of us, that I'm valuable and you're valuable, and neither of us is more valuable than the other. We're valuable in different ways based on the unique gifts and talents that we bring. And so I think that is enormously powerful. And so that's why I want to pick up that book after the first of the year. So you may want to go ahead and add that to your library, get it on Kindle or Amazon, if you still read hard, physical books. Conscious Living, Gay Hendricks. I want to dive into that. It deals with a lot of stuff, like something I just read recently, because I'm still making my way through the book. It talked about like, how you were conceived, and how sometimes there can be drama around how you were conceived. Maybe you were the result of a rape, or maybe it was an unplanned pregnancy, and all of that emotion that is a part of the birth gets transferred to you in the form of energy. And sometimes you come into life wearing an energy that you didn't even know was being handed to you. And so he goes through how to uncover all of that. So it's really, really, really powerful stuff, because the whole point of the book and all of it is to come to life and to be fully present, to be fully open and fully available for what life has to give you. And so I think that's a great way to start 2021, especially after coming out of 2020 with all of what we've gone through in this year. So just to review the 2 agreements that we've done so far, we have talked about be impeccable with your word. And we said that to be impeccable with your word is to use your word flawlessly, that the word impeccable means without sin. And to use your word without sin means that you never use your word against yourself. You only use your word against another person if you have used it first against yourself, because people never come to you bringing what pertains to you. They always come to you bringing what pertains to them. So before they insulted you, they insulted themselves. Now they may not be consciously aware of the insult, but you cannot give what's not alive in you. And so if you come spewing dissension, if you come spewing hate, if you come spewing anger, whatever it is, it had to first wake up inside of you before you could go and hand it off to somebody else. And so when we talk about being impeccable with your word, what we're saying is that that it is to be flawless in the way that you speak about you, because if you're flawless in the way that you speak about you, both inwardly and outwardly, you're going to be flawless in the way that you speak about other people. You just, it won't be in you to bring that kind of energy or drama or hate or whatever to someone else. So be impeccable with your word. The second thing is don't take things personally. So, we talked about this last week, not taking things personally, that the more you love you, the less you take things personally. So if there's a place where you're taking things personally, that's a place where you can begin to look and say, I got some self-love I need to do. Because you wouldn't even be able to find that emotional trigger if I didn't have it available for you to trip. Right? The trip wire, I set the trip wire. You may have stumbled over the trip wire with your comment, right? Or with your action. You may have stumbled over it and set off a landmine in my life. And now you and I have beef, or you and I don't get along, or I keep it to myself. I don't even tell you that you've hurt my feelings, right? But I set the wire. And the way that I get rid of the wires that I have set is through self-love. And that's why that challenge is so powerful, and I keep harping on it, is that the more you love you, the more you dissolve those places in you that invite someone to offend you or to hurt you. And it doesn't mean that you don't get upset or you're not taken aback or anything like that, but it just means that I'm not taking it personally. So this is, someone came to me after I gave the talk a couple of weeks ago about this and said, so are we not supposed to do anything about racism and about all these other things? And I was like, okay, we've got these things coupled in our mind as if not taking it personally means being passive. And I want to be clear that I am 100% not telling anybody to be passive. We very much need to be advocating for justice and civil rights and human rights, right? For the dignity of all people, 100%. But that's different from taking it personally. Taking it personally means that I get emotionally involved in it. And what we need, especially on the front lines, are people who are passionate, but people who are not so emotionally involved that they can't see the forest for the trees. We need people who are able to be strategic, who are able to think through processes and to see 15 moves down the line. And if you're caught up in your emotions about what somebody said or what somebody did, then your eyes aren't clear enough to be able to see further enough down the road. And so you're out there expending energy, but you're not being effective. And so I want to be clear that not taking things personally does not mean not doing something about the injustices that you see in the world. It means that I recognize that if you came to me with hate, you're eating a plate of hate. And I can't change anything about that because I don't have any control over what you put in your spiritual mouth. I only control what I put in my spiritual mouth. So the third agreement. Oh, let me back up. Are there any questions on those first two agreements? Any insights, any aha moments?
It's the perfect time for me.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Yes.
That's the perfect time for me to grow beyond where I'm at.
Okay.
I mean, I read this book how many years ago?
Yes, same. I got the markings.
Yeah.
I got the old markings in the book. There are places in the book that I swear I didn't read that weren't in there the first time.
That's right.
Yeah.
I've even introduced it to other people, and how marvelous and stuff, but it's time for me to, at this point, to really implement the information that I'm reading.
Let me share with you something. I don't know if I can pick it up fast. This was, I started reading something that Oprah reads. She reads something called A Bowl of Sake. And it is from the Sufi Inayat, whatever. I'm not going to get the name right because I'm just learning it. but he's a Sufi. You know, Sufi is akin to New Thought. Sufism is akin to New Thought, that all the Judeo religions, Judeo-Christian religions, or that the Abrahamic faiths have a metaphysical arm. And so Islam has Sufism, Christianity has us, New Thought, and Judaism has the Kabbalah. And so this is a Sufi thought leader who lived in the early part of the 20th century. And so this is where I got that from. It says, amusingly, someone once sent me an email to say they had canceled their subscription, this is to the Bowl of Sake, after a year because they had read it already. Not saying that they had already mastered it all. Not saying that it no longer suited them. Not saying that they were called to another path, but simply because they had already read it. Alas, simply reading the words is not the point of this delightful work. The goal here is mastery. It is the art of practicing these ideals in every moment of daily life, which is the challenge. And for most of us, that takes repetition and effort day after day, year after year. And so I thought that was so powerful, because so many times we come to something and we're like, oh yeah, I read that already. Oh yeah, I'm aware of that already. And that's part of the not making assumptions, which we'll get to, is that there is an openness that's required in order to be filled at the top, right? In order to get something new. Oh, I got one more thing to give you. In order to get something new, you got to be willing to let go of what you have. Is this from yesterday's? This was really, really powerful. It's a quote from the guy, I can't call his name right now, but Bowl of Sake, and Sake is spelled Saki. And if you look it up, and it says, the man filled with the knowledge of names and forms has no capacity for the knowledge of truth. And I thought that was so powerful. The man filled, I'm going to put this in the chat. The man filled with the knowledge of names and forms has no capacity for the knowledge of truth. If you come to it saying, oh yeah, I already know that. Oh yeah, I've been there. I took that class. Did you master that class? Are you open to new levels? It's kind of like if you've ever forgiven someone, but then something comes up and you realize, oh my God, there's still more to forgive. Well, it isn't that you didn't forgive the person, you forgave them at the level of consciousness that you were at. But now that you have grown into a new level of consciousness, there's a deeper level of forgiveness. So it doesn't mean that you didn't do the work, but it means the work was unfinished and you did all that you could do. You know, when you go through first grade and you take math, you can't do geometry. You can do all the math that is available up to that moment. And then at that point, you've got to like back up and wait till some more growth, till you incorporate what you've learned into your being. And when it has become a part of you, then you can step in and do the higher level of math. And so generally when someone gets to a level of math or anything, doesn't have to be math, but gets to a level of anything and they aren't able to advance further, they're having trouble with the concepts, is because they haven't finished incorporating what they first learned into themselves. So they're not ready for this level of learning. They haven't outgrown where they were, so they can't be fully available to where they're trying to go. And unfortunately, people label themselves dumb or stupid or whatever when that happens, when in actuality, all that's happening is that I just didn't finish that last level of learning. And so I need to go back and master those concepts. Then I can step up here and do the geometry. I can step up here and do the calculus. And so it's understanding that about our souls that then opens us up. So I say all that to say, it's coming to this book now. I mean, gosh, I know I read it before seminary. So I finished seminary. I've been doing 7 years of the Bible Hangout. I've been speaking around the world. I've had my own overcomings in different areas. You know, with the growth that we've had at Up Church, I'm a different kind of leader. Like, it's so many things that are different about me. Up Church has grown because we've added staff. You know, we're no longer just a 1 and 2 person operation. So this is a really powerful time. Like, every time you come back to it, you're a new person. And every leap in consciousness that you make, when you go back to those fundamentals, you'll see things that they were there on the page because they were on the page, but you won't, you wouldn't have been able to see it because you just weren't at that level. It's like if I put geometry in front of Jordan, it just looks like shapes to him. Like they don't, all the relationship of the triangles and all of that doesn't mean anything to him. Radius, circumference, what are those words? He knows circle, square, and rectangle, you know, and pentagon, right? Beyond that, it doesn't mean anything because he's not yet grown to that level. So just something that, I don't know who that was for, but that came up in my spirit to share that. Okay. We miss you too, Wanda. She said, love and miss Up Church. We miss you too. And Constance, I'll have to pull the Sufi thing. I'll forward the email to you so you'll have it. So assumption. So an assumption is a story that you've told yourself that has no basis in reality, but you believe it. Has anybody ever made an assumption about you? And you're like, where did you get that from? Like, you know, I had someone, this is something I had to learn as a leader. I had to learn to walk slow because I walk with purpose. I got somewhere to be. I ain't got no time to waste. I got to get to the business of what it is that I've got to do. But I had someone who said, you never speak to me. I'm thinking, what? Are you like, because I'm the kind of person where I feel like I overdo it. Like I speak to everyone, but apparently in this person's, and the person had made a whole decision about how I felt about them because of their perception that I didn't speak to them. And I'm thinking, I didn't even know you were there. But if I did, I would not have purposely ignored you. Like 100%, I would not have purposely ignored you. And so I had to learn as a leader that what happens in leadership is that people will look at you and project their fears on you, and they will interpret your actions as being about them when they may not have anything to do with them at all. And so I've learned when I come into the church to just walk slow, you know, to not do my normal pace, which is get to that office, get the work done and get on it. That kind of energy, for whatever reason, people interpret that as I'm unimportant to Sherry when everybody is important to me. That's why I'm moving so fast, but it's not reading that way. And so you may have places in your life where people are making assumptions about you. But my question is, where are the places where you're making assumptions? Are there places in your life where you're making assumptions, where you've told a story and you believe it? Nobody wants to own up to that. I take a moment and sip my water.
Well, I used to do that in my relationship with Vale. And it would be like, we'd have a discussion, and then according to what I heard and what I understood, I'd have a conversation in my head, and I didn't like the conversation. I didn't like the way I answered for her. So then I will walk around and just be pissy. And then it's like, what's wrong with you? Nothing, you know, but I didn't have a conversation, but it was in my head. So through the years, we've been together 34 years. So through the years, I'm learning not to do that. Not that I don't still do it.
First of all, I appreciate your authenticity and thank you for that, because we all do that. Wanted to put the thumbs up. We all do that, where something happens and then I work it out with you in my head. But I've answered the question. I've put words in your mouth. I have assumed how you feel about it. And then I'm responding to you, not based on what you're doing. I'm responding to you based on what you did in my story. Yes. The problem with an assumption, I'm not going to use the familiar, it makes out of you and me. The problem with an assumption is that it assumes that you have a panoramic view. It assumes that the way that I'm looking at it is the totality, is the complete way to look at it. That's the problem with an assumption. It assumes that there is no other way to see this set of circumstances other than the way that I see it. And that's a problem, because how many times have you seen something one way and then you get some additional information and then find out, wow, that was not what I thought it was going to be at all. You know, Wanda says, I love this agreement. It has helped me in all my relationships. Yes, 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 yes. You know, the problem with assumptions is that assumptions leave no room for God. That's really the problem with assumptions. That assumptions run on the belief that we've seen or what we've heard or perceived is all that there is to be seen or heard or perceived. And so the truth is that we have to learn to say, I'm making the best decision that I know how to make in this moment with the information that I have. And this is the best that I know how to do right now. But I allow God to show me a better way so that I may have what is for my highest good. And so spiritual maturity is about coming to each moment asking, is there another way to see this? Is there a different way to approach this? You know, this is something to learn when you work in organizations, because part of working in an organization is that everybody gets to have their hands in the idea. You don't get 100% ownership of an idea. And if you haven't learned to let other people contribute to an idea and you become, you know, closed off to it, you make the assumption that the way that I've come up with this idea is the best way for this idea to be presented and to be executed, then you become somebody that's hard to work with. And it's like, I don't want to be on that person's team because they don't share, right? They're unwilling to incorporate other ideas into how something should be executed. And nothing is the best way that something can be done. Nothing is, not as grand as something is, it also is not the best way that it can be done. There's always another way. And so we have to come to each moment open. You know, we talked about assumptions, and thank you, Constance, for sharing that story. Assumptions create drama in our relationships because we make assumptions about what other people are thinking. We take it personally, and then we blame them and react by sending our emotional poison out with our word. And so now we've used our word unimpeccably. And the truth is that almost all conflict in every relationship anywhere, you can boil it down to somebody making an assumption and then that they believed and then that they're acting on. It's a really destructive habit. It's a really, really, really destructive habit.
On the second paragraph, which is all the sadness and drama you have lived in your life was rooted in making assumptions and taking things personally, I put ouch next to it.
Yes. Yes.
You know, because it takes a lot to own up to it and to know that the reason why you're sitting in whatever is because of your own making and the assumptions and taking it personal and all that, you know, and then working through it. And then making sure that you connect yourself to source.
Right. Right.
To get out of it.
Yeah. I think the most powerful thing is the willingness to be authentic with yourself. And the truth is that we all break these agreements. There's not, you know, whoever is the most holy, sanctified person you think there is, they all break these agreements. So we're talking about reaching for an ideal, right? We're reaching for something higher than how we're living right now. And so there are places where I'm 100% impeccable with my word. You wouldn't catch me saying something crazy. And then there are other places where I need to just get a little zipper and zip my mouth shut. You know, there are places where I 100% don't take something personally. you know, and then there are places where I 100% do. So it's just realizing that, like, think of this more as being on a spectrum than like an all or nothing. And then it's about then improving as opposed to being, you know, 100% versus 0%. That this is a spectrum that we are moving on, and we're trying to move closer to the ideal of be impeccable with your word, don't take things personally, don't make assumptions. Assumptions, the part of the reason they create drama is that they don't consider the other person's opinion. It's I won't mention a name, but let's just say he was a very attractive person, but he kept telling a story about him and me in his head. And I wasn't winning in the story. And so it got to the place where I realized I cannot compete with the story in your head. And so I'm going to actually have to let this potential relationship go, because you can't stop telling the story. So that's the problem with assumptions, is that they never let the other person's opinion in. I have tried you, I have convicted you, and I have judged you and convicted you and sentenced you, and the whole thing has happened inside of my head. And whether or not, I mean, who knows what could have been, because we could never get past the story that was happening in this person's head. Constance says to realize where I'm at and not to beat myself up. Amen. Amen. Assumptions shut us off from potential opportunities. This is what Ruiz says. He says, we make the assumption that everyone sees life the way we do. We assume that others think the way we think, feel the way we feel, judge the way we judge, and abuse the way we abuse. This is the biggest assumption that humans make, and this is why we have a fear of being ourselves around others, because we think everyone else will judge us, victimize us, abuse us, and blame us as we do ourselves. So even before others have a chance to reject us, we have already rejected ourselves. If that is not the gospel, right, that just needed to be like John chapter 35, verse 10. How many times have you walked into a space and you thought everyone was making an assumption about you or judging you based on something you quote unquote didn't have? And come to find out, nobody cared. You know, I have a friend who doesn't have a college degree, he didn't finish. And it's something that's like a thing for him. Now, you know, I think I mentioned this last week. It's a thing for him. And he's, you know, always like trying to cover for not having that college degree. And he's assuming that people are judging him based on that. And it's almost like beneath the surface, right? It's how he comes into a room. And so he's almost always over preparing so that if he's ever in a room with someone with a degree, he won't feel like they feel like he's less than. When in actuality, the people in the room, no one ever asks for your degree. No one ever comes to me and says, hey, Sherry, can I see your diploma before I have a conversation with you? It's like, but we assume that people judge us the way that we judge ourselves. And so a lot of times what will happen is that we will keep ourselves away from opportunities that really could be ours if we would just put ourselves out there. We've prejudged ourselves because we've decided that how we are and what we have is not enough. And so we cut ourselves off before good can even come into our experience. Has that ever happened to anyone? Does anyone have an experience with that? Jordan says, anyone?
That's funny. I just unmuted so I can laugh. Right. Tell Jordan, all right now.
With water right now.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
That's right.
Okay.
So,
Bye-bye.
and also, did you know
Okay.
Karen brings sparkling
One-
water to school?
One of the things, this was this I learned this from Tony Robbins, but this is not his original work. It is that there are 6 basic human needs, and one of them is for safety or security. And part of what causes us to make assumptions, what sends us off into the world of assumptions, is that we're trying to stay safe. And so we assume that we make assumptions out of a need to protect ourselves. So we come into a room and we need to make sure that we're safe. And so we make assumptions about the room, but they're out of an effort to protect ourselves. And so one of the things that you can do to help yourself not make assumptions is just to come to each moment affirming that I'm safe, I'm loved, and I'm in my right place. And so if you have to walk into well, nobody's in anything physical right now, but when we do get back out in life and you come to a space and it's like, you know what, I've got to go in here, I got a network and I don't know anybody in the room, or I'm going to a dinner and I don't know the people, or maybe you have social phobias. One of the things that you can do is to simply just meditate on, I am safe, I am loved, I am in my right place. Because what that does for you is that it calms you down. Like there's a reaction that's happening in the body. And so what we start to do because of the fear that's happening in the body is we start running, trying to make assumptions so that we can assess the situation so that we feel safe. And so a lot of assumption making is about keeping ourselves safe. It's very vulnerable to come to a moment and make no assumptions, because you have to be completely open, right? To come to a moment and not make any assumptions about how things are going to go. It requires an openness that, quite frankly, many of us don't have. One, we don't practice it, so it's not something that we're habited toward. And so what we do is we make these assumptions because we're trying to okay, who's in power, who's higher, who's lower. We're making all of these assessments as we come into a space, whereas the way that we're meant to come into a space is to be completely open, to be completely available. Andrea says, I am safe, I am loved, I'm in my right place. I love that. I'm going to use it. Good.
Reverend Sherry, I just wanted to say that I do recognize that a lot in different settings, how uncomfortable some people are and how they may be insecure because of the crowd that they're around. And I'm saying that to say that I recognize it because it's obviously been in me. I've had that experience somewhere.
Right.
And
Right.
I've overcome it by realizing that no one is any better or any worse than I am. And I feel like I can go into any room and be comfortable and speak to anyone.
Nice. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you.
Reverend Sherry, it's interesting you talk about, the power levels. I remember as a new teacher, very young, starting out, and it was an older teacher in the building who told me very early, it's not the principal that really runs the school. It's the custodian and the secretary. And if you can get in with them, you won't have to ever worry about anything, because the custodian will keep your room clean and the secretary will really tell you what's happening. And I found that to be true throughout various occupations. It's really not that so-called leader that's always running the show. It's that person behind the scene who's not making the money, but they really know what's going on.
Right.
And so that is really, it's very interesting to me when you talked about that power hierarchy, because most people would think, well, if you're the boss, if you're the, the head honcho, then you must be the one. You really are not.
Right. Love that. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Wanda says, yes, I've heard that. Yes.
Hi,
Part
Tess,
of-
I have my ice cream.
Okay, go ahead, baby. Go ahead. Part of one of the characteristics of the mind is this need to justify. Like our minds are constantly trying to justify everything, to explain and understand everything in order to feel safe. And so we have millions of questions. I don't know if you've noticed this about your mind, but really the mind thinks in questions. And the basic question is, what is this? But it wakes up and you wake up and the question is, what will I wear? What will I eat? When will I get in the shower? Will I get in the shower? And it's this litany of questions, and it's hundreds of them on a daily basis, if not thousands of them on a daily basis. Which route will I take to work? What time will I get on the Zoom? What time do I have to do this? When do I need to do that? Like, what, why will I? And there are these questions that are coming, right? It's the way that the mind processes information. And so there's always a question. And so the mind is always trying to find answers to these questions so that we can assess the situation and feel safe, right? Everything's about that basic need. It is, one of the things that psychologists are talking about with the pandemic and how it's affecting people is that it's creating all of this uncertainty, right? And the lack of certainty makes people feel unsafe. And so the mind can only handle so much uncertainty before it just checks out. And so people are putting on the COVID-15, or they are going stir crazy, or some people are just like, you know what, whatever, I'm gonna go out, and if I get it, I get it, or whatever. That it's this response to uncertainty. That uncertainty is the mind can only take so much uncertainty. And so when it plays out, that it can, I don't want to say create like a break, but it has a negative impact on you. So these questions, the mind is constantly looking for answers to these questions. And so making assumptions is one of the ways that we satisfy the millions of questions that our mind is asking. And so I know that the agreement is don't make assumptions, but the truth is that we all make assumptions, because again, the nature of the mind is to have questions. And so we actually couldn't deal with it if we had to sit with no answers to those questions. And so a better approach is what Jesus talks about in John 7:24, which is do not judge according to appearance, but judge with righteous judgment. There is no such thing as don't make assumptions. There's no, the most skilled or amazing guru on the planet cannot come to a present moment and make no assumptions. There's no such thing. What you want to do is that you want to make healthy assumptions. You want to come to each moment making an assumption that prospers you and that expands you rather than shuts you down. That's really what you want. And many times the way that we've been trained or conditioned, we make assumptions that basically close us down as opposed to open us up. And so I want to talk about how to make some healthy assumptions. So again, the mind is telling stories and is using questions. So we have to work with the mind the way the mind works. And so the best way to keep yourself from making a false assumption is to ask questions. You want to ask questions like maybe Constance, you can attest to this. I certainly can in the case of this person who shall remain nameless, that the person never came to me to ask a question. The person made all these decisions in his head about how I felt and what I thought and what I was going to do, and never once just asked me. Just ask, like, how do you feel about this? Are you open to this? Would you be willing to? And so what could have been probably a beautiful love relationship is like, wah, wah. Because again, the false assumptions interfered with the potential for any kind of relationship. And so the way to keep yourself from making false assumptions is to ask questions. Even when you think you know the answer, ask a question. And that takes a lot of courage, because some of us have learned, unfortunately, in childhood or through school, to not ask questions. We're almost embarrassed by what we don't know. But the thing is that the way we move through life is to ask questions. And so we have to have the courage to ask for clarifying information. We have to have the courage to say, what do you think about this? Right? Well, can you tell me a little bit more about that comment that you made? Like what made you say that? Or what outcome were you looking for? Wanda said, some of my family members say I ask too many questions. I understand that I need to gather information to make an informed decision. Absolutely. I don't believe there's anything as too many questions. I believe there's a paralysis of analysis. I do believe that, because you're not meant to stay in the question. You got to get to action. But beyond that, I think you need to ask enough questions, because you want to be able to make a full commitment. Right? You want to be able to make a commitment where you are all in on whatever it is. If it's all in on making Play-Doh, or all in on baking a pie, or all in on buying a car, or all in on a career path, you want to ask enough questions so that you are making a decision that lines up with who you are. And you have to be afraid. You have to be unafraid to ask questions. Some people will shame you for the questions that you ask. This happens a lot more in corporate settings, but sometimes this happens in families too. But you don't know that already. You know, I'm exploring a new path. I'm developing myself as a financial planner that is going to round out my ministry in a different way and expand the way that I do ministry. And so I was asking questions of the person who's kind of like a mentor to me in this process. And the person said, I can't believe you don't know this already. And because in their mind, this is information that you should have. And so sometimes in corporate settings or in business settings, we can feel afraid to ask a question because we are, what's the word I want to use? We don't want to be shamed, or we should know it already. And the thing is that you stifle your growth. And so I made a decision a long time ago. I am not going to worry about whether or not you think I ought to know it. I'm going to ask a question so that I can get an answer. And I'm going to be bold enough to ask that question. And it takes a lot of courage. I'm not saying that it's easy, because when that person, this was a comment said to me recently, like in the last 7 days, when that person said that to me, I felt, that kind of, one of the pinpricks, right? And I felt that, but I had to remind myself, no, I've made an agreement to be a learner. And I'm grateful that you thought I was further along, but guess what? I'm not. So here's my question. Let's get an answer, right? Is there a book I should go to? Because maybe you don't have the consciousness to like share with me on this level. Is there a book that you can refer me to? Because I'm willing to read, but I'm not willing to lie about what I don't know. And I'm not willing to pretend like I know. So again, be willing to ask questions. Andrea says, I got a couple things. Andrea says, I don't mind questions because almost invariably someone else has the same question or expands upon my question. I have experienced this over many years. Yes. Constance says, questions were dangerous to and for me. In early childhood, depending on the question, I always searched for the right answer. And no matter what I answered, I was either punished or made to feel bad. Over the years, I'm learning that questions are necessary and needed. Yes, I'm glad you said that, because sometimes you were, not you, Constance, but I mean you like general, you were asking questions that challenge the knowledge base of the adults in your presence that you were raised around. And so you may have been asking questions that maybe they had, and they had been shamed out of asking. This happens a lot in church settings where, here's what I want to know. I know about the people on this side that were in the Bible, but what about the people on the other side of the earth? And that was always my question. What about the people on the other side of the earth? Like, I just couldn't buy into this idea that they were just this one little group of people in this one little corner, but the rest of the earth was just you know, and so I wanted to know about those people. Well, my Sunday school teachers didn't have an answer for that. And me pressing and trying to get an answer might have created problems. So I 100% get that. And then it can happen in families. You know, sometimes it's people have accepted things in families, like this is the way that we do things. And then this little 5-year-old comes along and says, well, why are you doing it that way? Ooh, you know, why? And hopefully there's an adult in the area that's wise and allows the question. But in many instances, that little 5-year-old is shut down and told that they're being fast, or they're sassing an adult, or whatever. That's country. But you know, they're sassing an adult, or they're inappropriate. Wanda says, I am that adult now. Girl, you better let them little people ask questions. All right. So I want to give you 5 essential questions to ask so that you can make the right assumptions. Because again, it's not about not making assumptions. It is about making the right assumptions. And so what guides this is 1 John 4, 1 and 2. And it says, beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits, whether they are of God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. By this, you know the Spirit of God. So in other words, you got to test the Spirit by the Spirit, right? You're testing the Spirit by the Spirit. And I want to give you 5 questions to do that. So the first question is, does this assumption agree with God? Does this assumption agree with God? Well, what is God? Well, God is everywhere evenly present. God is the only power and presence there is. God is omnipotence, omniscience, omnipresence. Does this assumption agree with or violate God, right? Does this assumption line up, right? So if I come to a moment and I say, you know what, there's nothing here for me. Does that assumption agree with God? Well, God is everywhere evenly present. And if God is present, opportunity is present, because opportunity comes from God. So the assumption that there's nothing here for me is a false assumption. Or if I come to a moment and I say, you know what, is this going to work out on my behalf? And I make the assumption that it's not going to work out for me. Wait a minute. God is absolute good, and God is everywhere evenly present. Is this someplace that God is? Well, yeah, because God is everywhere evenly present. Then my good is here as well. So again, you're looking at, does this assumption agree with God? Does this assumption agree with God? Then the second thing you want to look at, the second question is, does this assumption agree with my divine nature? Does this assumption agree with my divine nature? Maybe you are working with a health challenge and you have been struggling to let this thing go, whatever this thing is. And it may have been 30 years you've been struggling to let this thing go. And you finally just assume that I'm not gonna be able to figure this out. This is beyond me. This is beyond my level of consciousness. Does this assumption agree with your divine nature? Well, my divine nature says that all things are possible. My divine nature says that I have no limits. My divine nature says that I can become anything that I'm willing to attach consistently and persistently to my I am. So does this assumption agree with my divine nature? Well, if the assumption is that I'm never going to figure this out, no, it doesn't agree with your divine nature. And so again, this is how you test the Spirit by the Spirit. The third question you want to ask is, does this assumption agree with my power to create my world through my thinking? Does this assumption agree with my power to create my world through my thinking? Now, this is really a powerful question to ask, because especially right now in this election season, that what is being awakened is this fear concept, right? This idea that someone or something has power over me. And if my candidate doesn't get in office, things are going to go bad for me. Right. And you know, we've lived through 400 years of this and 500 years of that and 2 days of the other. And so therefore, if this outcome doesn't work out in my favor, things are going to go bad for me. Well, I have the power to create my world through my thinking. So the assumption that things are going to go bad, regardless of what's going on in the outside world, or that things are going to go good because of what's going on in the outside world, is a false assumption. The truth is that I create my own reality. The truth is that my thinking makes it so. Because even in this climate, where your person might not be in office, people that look like you are prospering. People that look like you are thriving. So the assumption that it could potentially go bad is really just a false assumption. That it has no basis in reality. And so you want to begin to, again, you're testing the spirit by the spirit, right? These are the questions that test the spirit. Do they agree with what we call those 5 basic principles from the Universal Foundation for Better Living, or the 5 principles of unity, depending on your school? The 4th question you want to ask is, does this assumption agree with my ability to practice the presence of God? Does this assumption agree with my ability to practice the presence of God? Through meditation, prayer, and sitting in the silence, I have the ability to be God in action wherever I go. When I come into the room, I am the thermostat and not the thermometer. I am raising the vibration. If I walk into the room, the vibration just got lifted because I walked in as God. I walked in as the God presence that I am. And so you might have been sitting in drama before I walked in the room, but when I come in bringing all of the energy and the enthusiasm and the expectancy of God. Does the assumption that I just made agree with or disagree with my ability to practice the presence of God? Well, if it does, then yes, then good, it lines up. But if it violates that, then it's not an assumption that I can afford to hold on to. Again, we're testing the spirit by the spirit. And then finally, does this assumption agree with the truth that all outer expression reflects my inner reality? Sometimes we assume that what I'm seeing outside of myself has no connection to what's happening inside of myself. I want to believe that my intentions and my results have nothing to do with one another, or that my results have nothing to do with my intentions. I want to believe that I've got an intention to be healthy, even though the results are the scale is increasing. I'm making a false assumption here. So does the assumption that I'm about to make agree with the idea that my outer results are always an unfailing witness of my inner reality? And if it agrees with that, it's an assumption that you can hold on to. And if it does not, then it's one that you need to let go. And so those are the 5 questions that you want to begin to ask. Let me go back and give you the questions again. Does the assumption agree with God? Does the assumption agree with my divine nature? Does the assumption agree with the power of my thoughts to create my world? Does the assumption agree with my ability to practice the presence of God? And does the assumption agree with my outer reality being an unfailing witness to my inner reality? Yes. So you said, please repeat number 5. Does this assumption that I'm making agree with the truth that my outer reality is a reflection of my inner reality? Sometimes I want to believe that what I'm seeing outside of me has nothing to do with what's happening inside of me. But if it's happening outside of me and I'm perceiving it, it's got a connection to something happening inside of me. I'm not aware of everything that's happening on the planet. I'm not aware of everything. None of us are aware of we are aware of the things that resonate with us internally. I'm not aware of all the stuff happening in the US. None of us are. I'm aware of the things that resonate with me internally, right? I've got some type of anchor inside of me, some level of consciousness that's awakened inside of me, and it's controlling whether or not I'm even aware of these different things. So I'm again, it's realizing that I'm not coming with the panoramic view. I'm coming with the view based on what's alive in me, based on what I've awakened, the consciousness that I've awakened in me. And so if I want to experience something different outwardly, I've got to wake up something different inwardly. And the way that I do that is by being impeccable with my word. When I'm impeccable with my word, I'm only speaking loving words, words of loving kindness and joy to myself. And that means that I'm waking up loving kindness and joy within myself. And if I wake loving kindness and joy up within myself, it's going to change my outer experience. Does not matter if nobody else is having that, no one else around me is having that experience. I'm awakening it in me. And if I keep awakening it, those who are not experiencing it and who have no capacity for it will move right on out of my experience. I will create the means through simply keeping it alive in me to move to a different place, to travel to a different place. Thank you, Wanda. She says, I know that to be true about you. You are impeccable with your word. I am doing my level best. I am doing my level best because I expect to be on the world stage. I just do. And I realize that I got to get comfortable with that. I don't always talk about it. I've said it sometimes and I really don't say it a lot, but I feel like, what you give me this for, God? Surely you didn't give me this to like stay in a box, to stay in a nice, neat little package over here. It's like, no. I got stuff that the world need. I got, what is it? Erykah Badu say, you want to eat some fruit from my apple tree? Yes, and the airplane is coming. I receive it. I receive it. Thank you guys for tonight. Any questions on this? So we have, let me get this calendar together. We have a few more Thursdays together. We've got, so we're going to do Always Do Your Best next week. And then we've got 3 Thursdays, right? Because Thanksgiving is on the, 29th. Okay. Am I saying that right? No. This is wrong. On the 5th, we're going to do Always Do Your Best. And we've got the 12th and the 19th. So then on the 12th and the 19th, we'll do something special. I'm not sure what, well, I'll figure it out. But we have 2 nights. Maybe we'll dig into the 5th agreement, which I've never studied before, which is be skeptical, but listen. And so I'll dig into that. And maybe we'll dig into that for the 12th and the 19th. And then we'll take a break, Thanksgiving through Christmas, and we'll pick back up on the 7th in January. So that'll be our calendar. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. I love and appreciate you. I'm glad that you were here this evening. And if there are any questions, please put them in the chat or in the live chat is going to be over soon. But I just bless you to have a beautiful week and to go and be God in action. Take care, everybody.